just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I feel at home in this world anymore. And oh Lord, yes, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Brother Glenn, a word of prayer. Yes, Father. Yes, Father. Yes, Father. Amen. Um, we started out last week looking at the introduction and overview of Romans. Um, my brother-in-law will be taking over a little while once we can get the um, Zoom or FaceTime thing going, and he'll be doing it. But until then, um, I'll be working through the overview of the introduction. And so we have developed, he has developed a few questions that get us going in this lesson plan here. What I do with the lesson I had, took mine. Okay, I think my wife hit the print button and forgot what she was printing. It's printed a ton of these things up. Okay. As we were saying last week, Romans was written while Paul was on his missionary journeys as a promise that God had made to him that he was going to go to Rome, and when he was going to be God's spokesman all the way up to the emperor, the most powerful man in the country. And so, as Paul is navigated there by God's will, uh, he writes them a letter to let them know that he has an interest in coming to see him. Now, the history behind the church at Rome was one that was established through the disciples from Jerusalem being scattered in Acts chapter 8 and 9 when Paul was Saul, and he was wreaking havoc on the church. And the Bible said that they went everywhere preaching and teaching the gospel. And because they did that, a lot of people heard it, and so by the time they get to Rome, there's a church already established at Rome that none of the apostles established, but it was established. Historians said most likely was established by those pilgrim Christians who had become scattered throughout Rome to establish that work there. And so now Paul sees an occasion to make his way there, and he reaches out to them to introduce himself and to start laying some foundations, expectations towards them. One of our questions asked here about Paul's journey was that when was the book of Romans written, and Paul's missionary journey? It asks when was it written, and what time frame was this book written? Because they had begun to write, and those epistles, and put those epistles together as early, some says early as 36 and 47 AD. So when we look at the book of Rome, and Paul is the one that pens it, we try to recognize what time of history that Paul pens this. Did anybody have a chance to research that to find out when did Paul write the book of Rome? Yeah, between 56, 58 AD, somewhere in there, around 57, 56, 56, 57, 58, somewhere in that neighborhood. There's no way to actually specifically nail down, but it's in the neighborhood. And that the place that he wrote it from while he was on his journey was while he was in Greece. Remember, he had went to Athens, and he had been on Mars Hill there in Acts chapter 17, and he had talked with the Epicureans, those folks who considered themselves the learned people of their day, and the ones who worked in the temple and housed the place of knowledge of all those who came to Athens. And so when they encounter Paul, Paul takes up to let us know the imagery of those people, how he saw them as being superstitious people by the way they conducted their religious activities. And as he looked on, and he began to tell them that he had perceived their superstition and that they were trying to cover all their bases. They were religious people, and they didn't want to disrespect any God. And so they put a rock up and put an epitaph on the rock to the unknown God. And so Paul was encountering all these in his journey as he writes his letter towards Rome. He's recognizing his headwinds that he's facing will be idolatry, idols everywhere. So in AD 57, when he sits down to pen the letter to Rome to make his introduction to them, he's hoping to create in them some expectation. Who is this Paul that they consider great debaters among us? Many of them have become of great age, and several have passed on. One of them being Brother Evans, and the president of Southwestern Christian College. He conducted many debates across the nation, as well as Brother Floyd Rose, and Brother Billy Washington. And Brother Billy Washington is still with us in Miami area, but his health is failing. He's in his 80s. And so we're looking to younger men, probably men like Brother Pounds from Hilltop, Brother Orpheus Haywood in Atlanta, men like that to take up the mantra, who will join the debate stage and discuss biblical truths. So Paul is writing to them. And then the question then becomes, where, when we look at this, we see that Paul, when the question was, where was he located at? We see that he was located in Corinth, which was that church that was often seized with a lot of problems because it was a Gentile church, the Grecian church. And so he's there working with that church, at the same time penning letters to Rome, letters to Ephesus, and letters to Philippi. And then number 3, the question asks, in the New Testament, what number place does the book of Romans hold? When we start counting the New Testament books, number 6, exactly. It's the 6th book in the New Testament. And the total of the New Testament books is 37. It's 39 in the Old Testament and 37 in the New Testament. makes up 66. The old preachers used to talk of it as if it was their gun. I got my 66, and they carried it everywhere they go. So you can remember that your canon of books holds 66 volumes in it, and that's what you need to carry with us everywhere we go. Number 4, the question was the Apostle Paul. Was the Apostle Paul on his first, second, or third missionary journey when he wrote the book of Rome? Yes, he was on his third missionary journey. This is third time around. We have that saying, the third time is usually a charm. In Paul's case, it ends Paul's journey. He never gets to make a fourth journey. Number 6, what was the letter to the church at Rome? What was the letter to the church at Rome intended to do? The letter to the church at Rome, what was it intended to do? In other words, what was Paul aimed to convey to the church at Rome? Yes. Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. His message was that he wanted to explain salvation to them, how salvation worked. He understood that they had obeyed the gospel, but he didn't know the depth of teaching that they had gotten, because those Christians that left Jerusalem, they all had been taught the rudimentary teaching of the gospel, what it takes to make a Christian, and they did those things. Ever how so limited they were, they did that. As we remember, the Old Testament is the New Testament concealed. And so they may not have been as gifted as Paul and Apollo or the other apostles who had the Spirit of God to explain, to bring the Old Testament into the light of day so that they could see it clearly. And so in the Old Testament, it had talked about all the way to the end times. When we look at the book of Daniel, Daniel prophesies all the way up to the end time. And we see that John, when he picks up the pen on Patmos, he also joins Daniel in describing the end time, the Armageddon of our end, how it will unfold. And so it becomes more vivid for us. And so these men, as they wrote, they was intended to impart this message to those who had embraced Christ. Romans 1:16, 15 and 16, I guess we'll say. Romans, 15 and 16. All right, thank you. So Paul here, he explains he's not ashamed of what Paul said. I'm not embarrassed, because remember when I was telling you when Paul was at Mars Hill in Acts chapter 17, he's been ridiculed by those Epicureans, those folks on Mars Hill, because they call him a babbler. What is this babbler saying? Young folk would use phrases like today, oh, he's just popping off. His lips just popping off. He's just saying stuff. What does it have any meaning? But they didn't realize what Paul was saying, even though it seemed foolishness to them. Paul was actually speaking and informing them of God's power to save, the message of God. He was revealing to them. But they couldn't appreciate it because it was something that was totally alien to their understanding and their carnal minds. So when Paul preached the resurrection of Jesus, their minds was clouded and could not comprehend until he continued to expound to them what God was doing. And so this is how he was intending to explain the salvation as it is God's power. Y'all look at it as a foolish thing, but this is power through God's word and able to change the life of the person that hears it. And that's an awesome thing to be able to express to somebody, that God's word has power to change that person that hears it. Because a lot of times people can hear a lot of things, but it doesn't change them, do it. They hear it, like I said, go in one ear and out the other. But this this word, this message, embedded in it is a power to redirect the hearts of men. So they were commanded to preach it everywhere. They were commanded to preach this gospel endlessly everywhere they went. Um, and then number 7 says, what effects does the apostle Paul says would be found in this message? In other words, what results would his message bring to the person that hears it? It would be to them an expansion of what they have ever heard. It would expand their mind beyond anything they had ever heard before. Nobody, especially in the Gentile world, had ever spoke of such concepts as justification, salvation, justification, glorification. Those terms was alien to the Gentile world because there was no aim or goal to fix it to. They believed in the polytheism of gods, and the gods they served wasn't served in the nature of them being, they themselves would become eternal. They served gods that was eternal, but they never saw themselves as becoming eternal. So they couldn't appreciate and put together what Paul is trying to say to them. And today, people still struggle with that same idea. What is justification, you know? And they don't understand that this is what God did to make you be right with him. He justified you. He made your condition to be right with him. So now you can have a relationship with him because of what you did. And I talk to people all the time, and they really don't have a concept of what you mean, I sin. I say, you're a sinner. No, I'm not a sinner. I haven't done anything wrong. So how could I be a sinner? And I'm like, what do you mean, how can you not be? And I realized that's a mind that does not know anything about God. So can you imagine the early Greeks who are hearing this thing about the Jewish God and having to think and say, they say that I'm a wrongdoer, I'm an evildoer, I've done things wrong, and there's a God that's going to hold me accountable, that's going to destroy me, and I need to change my mind, I need to become aware of him, I need to make some adjustments in my life. Why? All of this is new to me. I've been living my life like this, and nobody has ever said anything like this to me. Why do I need to listen to this right here and adjust my life to what they're saying? So you got two different mindsets coming together. A mind that never had to consider that, it never meant anything to them, they were never told about it. So, but now that they're being told about it, Paul said now you have the opportunity to reshape your thinking because you've been informed about something that you didn't previously know. And that's God's intention, to make you aware that you're a sinner, that you have done his justice wrong, and introduce himself to who he is, and that he tells them, and let's get Acts chapter 17 and look there and see how Paul tells them who this God is and how this God has affected our lives. Because if they can't appreciate how God affected their lives, that God will mean nothing to them. It has no impact on them. But if they can appreciate, hey, I didn't know that this God did all this for me. I didn't know that this is the God that actually caused the effect of my life in this world and coming into existence. We had a different theory for how the world came into existence. But they're saying that this God said the world came into existence this way. And so, yeah, 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 mm-hmm, yep. Yeah, so those three, yeah, provide the guidance, provide direction to them, how to live out their life, and to provide that encouragement, because we all need edification, encouragement, so that we could be functional, we could be happy in our pursuit as we serve God. So yeah, those are the things that Paul is reaching to express to these Jews, and along with that was in that message, as he explained the salvation to them, the gospel, he helps them to understand that they are approaching God that provides this salvation, and what that salvation entails, so that they can have an understanding of what does it mean to have salvation. If you don't know what salvation means, you can't appreciate having it. So he wants to express that to them, and so. In Romans chapter 17, at verse 16, let's see what Paul tell those folks there on Mars Hill. Let's read that section there. Romans 17, starting at verse 16. Acts 17. Yeah, idolatry, yeah. Yeah, yeah, read on. Epicurean, Stoics. The Aprogus. Aprogus. Yeah. Okay, so in this here discussion, here we'll look at this and then we'll move on. So we see that Paul, when he gets there, he sees all these things in the city. And what's interesting is, in this city, Jews are living there. And they have a command on them not to be partakers of idolatry, or to submit themselves into an environment where idolatry is worship or practice. But nevertheless, they're there. But one thing we realize, the Jews are a conquered people. They're under the dominion of Rome. And Rome has dispersed them all over the place. So Paul is finding these Jews popping up everywhere. So when he sees these Jews, he encounters and he brings this message to them. Because there's no guarantee that he knows that they were privileged to be in Jerusalem and hear what others had heard. So he's providing them that information to get them informed as to what has happened in Jerusalem, and as to what Jesus have done and what has happened to Jesus. And people are listening to Paul make his daily discourse among these Jews while he's there. And while he does that, they say then these certain philosophers of Epicureans and Stoics encounter him. And because they heard him. They heard him in courtyards, in the place where he was talking. And the Stoics, and what they did, they said, "What will this babbler say?" Some said he seemed to be a setter forth of a strange God, because he preaches unto them Jesus and the resurrection. So they had to have heard him, didn't they? So because they couldn't express the idea of resurrection, they couldn't express this Jesus And and I did a, he said something. We don't really know how to put it together, but who would? Because Paul is telling them something that had never happened in the history of human affairs. No man had ever got himself up from the dead. It has never happened. So now this fantastic, in the mind, I'm sure in the mind of them, it would sound like what, a fantastic story? And it would sound like something you could believe. Yeah, if you lived all your life and everything you ever know, would you believe that? That there was a man that died and got himself up? That would be hard to believe, because if you live long, you will see a lot of people die. And if you never see one get up, and then somebody came and tell you about one that got up, you will be a little suspicious, aren't you? And so this is the mindset that he's probably dealing with here, the people that have that mindset. And so he goes on to say, and they took him. This fantastic, they heard this fantastic, so they took it. And they brought him to the Areopagus and said, may we know what new doctrine whereof thou speakest is. Tell us about this fantastic thing we've been hearing, you've been saying, rehearse it to us. We want to hear this thing. And so Paul was able to begin to speak to them. He said there he found the Athenians, he found strangers, and these strangers are really Jews from different places that he referred to as strangers. And he said, but they spent their time. Can you imagine they occupied themselves nothing else but trying to hear and trying to discover some new thing. A friend of mine was in Tampa this week, and he was saying that he met some young African-American guys and got in a discussion with them, and they were saying that the church was all wrong and that our concept of Jesus was all wrong, because Jesus is the tree of life, and y'all don't worship Jesus as the tree of life. And so my friend said, what are you saying? Jesus is, so my friend started trying to explain to them, no, the tree of life was in the garden that God made in the beginning with Adam and Eve. It was allowed to them, but the tree of knowledge of good and evil was not allowed to them. But the other person that he was talking to, they emphatically believed that Jesus meant metaphorically and figuratively and justificationally, that justifies us as who we are, was the tree of life. And I'm like, where did he get that strange doctrine from? And to be so passionate about it and try to convince you that you got to believe that Jesus is the tree of life. Jesus created the tree of life. So how would you reduce him to such a thing that he's the creator of? Say all things was created by him and for him, but you say that he's this created thing. So I said, well, people are reading. It's not the lack of people reading. They're reading. But are they understanding it correctly? So, but when they're passionate about what they've read, they come out and they start pushing it. That they want you to hear their view and accept it, because, you've been looking at it all these years, but you've been looking at it wrong, because only I can see that. And so it was an interesting conversation. But, when you don't have a lot of time, you just can't stay and indulge yourself in that. You have to move on. But this is where he was. And so it throws you back to where the same thing that in verse 10, when it said that when this message had begun to be taught in other places, like in Thessalonica and Berea, the Jews that heard it, the Bible said they took the time to research. And in verse 10 it said, and the brethren immediately sent Paul and Silas by night to Berea, who coming thither went into the synagogues of the Jews. These were more noble than those of Thessalonica, and that they received the word with readiness of mind and searched the scriptures daily, whether those things were so. What is Luke expressing to us here in this text about these people? How do you see Luke's description of these people? People from one city, is one city more in line or more astute to looking into something than the other city of folks? How is that? Yeah. And yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so they may have had someone that come along and had expounded things to them more deeply, and so they had a stronger sense of saying, let us take the time to look at this. Let us line, as the prophets of the Old Testament said, line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. So you start putting this picture together that Paul is selling a God on a tree, a God on a cross. Paul is selling the image. There's a God, there was a God put on the cross. And that God that was put on the cross, he died. How God can never die. So that just make you mad. Go, really, what are you saying? you know. And so Paul is selling it. So the Bereans are into researching. What about us? Should we have that same mindset like the Bereans? Taking the time to search it out, to bounce off each other the things that are being said, so that we can have a deeper appreciation of those truths. And so we can also say, okay, well, we want to send a letter. We want to be ready when Paul and Silas come back this way. And so they prepare themselves to have a deeper conversation on these matters. But he goes on to help us to understand that after he talks with these Jews, and he said he spent time there, and doing nothing but going after it over and over and over. And he's up and down the marketplace. He's up and down their streets. And the Bible says he's even up into their temples. Now, you bold when you go up into somebody's temple. You know, that's their stronghold, isn't it? And Paul finds himself, what is that, verse 12, verse 21, 21, 22. Read 21 and 22. Seventeen, 21, and 22. What is that? What is it? What does it mean to be too superstitious? Is it all right to be superstitious? Yeah, and being too superstitious. Now, when I was a kid, to me, superstition meant, when the kids taught me, say, don't step on that crack. Yeah, I'm 4, 5 years old. I don't want to beat my mama back. So I'm listening and I'm taking in what they're saying, And then when I got older, I'm riding down the road with my aunt, and she slams on brakes, and she starts fussing and turns the car around. I'm like, what's wrong with Auntie Hildred here? Don't slam on brakes. Ain't nothing out here, and she fussing, and she turns around and finally she say, that darn black cat went across that road. Now I gotta go all. I said, a black cat? She stopped the car, went all the way back to the store, and started over again. Over a cat. I would have ran over that cat. But that's the superstition, that was in my community, stuff like that, and people held dear to it. Even to the idea of breaking anybody heard about breaking a mirror? Yes, 7 years of bad luck. You handled that mirror more gently than anything in the world because you didn't want those 7 years of bad luck. So we know what it means to have superstition. And Paul tells these people, opposite, y'all are just too superstitious. Why did he say that? Somebody read on and see why Paul say that to these people. Okay, now Paul is making a direct assault on these people. Why? Because they've created all these statues to the god Apollo, Zeus, Athena, Diana, all of these gods. They got these beautiful, beautiful temple images of all these gods. Their mighty bows, their thunderbolts, and all the regalia that they're known for their beauty and all this here. And it's like a museum of statues. And the manicured perfection. And Paul is looking at it, he said, all of this y'all made with y'all hands. You say this is your God, but this is a God that was made with hands. The God that we know is not made with hands. He does everything that you do and more, but he doesn't even use his hands. We can't fathom how to do anything without the operation of our hands. And so I'm sure they're looking at Paul saying, how can there be a God to do anything and have no hands involved? So this is miraculous to them. Paul is trying to open their eyes to the miraculousness, to the supernatural abilities of the God that he's introducing them to, so that they can have a deep appreciation. And he tells them about how this God so joins and creates everything in the whole world. He made the world. And I'm sure they were shocked at that, because remember, you're on Mars Hill. Greece is that center of, they say Greece was the center of knowledge at that time. Greece had gone into Africa and gathered up all the knowledge that they could find among all the other nations. As they had conquest and wars and stuff, they had gathered up all the knowledge. And then they bring it back to Greece. And they set up these schools of learning and teach and teach and teach. So now, here come Paul, and Paul throws a monkey wrench probably in their theory, because during that time, everyone thought the world was flat and wasn't round. Everyone thought that the gods lived on Mount Olympus. But here's Paul saying, no, the God I'm talking about creates the whole world. Now, how do their God measure up that live on a mountain to a God that creates the world? How do you vision that God? Because you got two images of God here. Ones that live on a mountain, and you got one that creates the mountain. So I'm sure their minds are racing as Paul tells them these things. And then he tells them about, and look how you worship him. Even your concept of worship, your theory in worship is off. And he tells them that the one thing that I'm sure that it was hard for them to wrap their mind around, because of all the race that was in Rome. Remember, Rome had conquered the known world. They had enslaved nations. And you see all of these people running around Rome. And Paul has the nerve to say that everybody in Rome came from one blood. Can you imagine the rich folk there, the ones that really see themselves as being special, thinking, I didn't come from their blood. They don't have my blood. I come from kings. I come from this here. How dare he says that we all are one blood? That's a hard saying to make. And even in our day and age, there's so much prejudice in our world. Do you think people of the world today believe that you and them have the same blood? Because that was, even in our society in America, they say if a person had 1% African American Negro blood in them, then they're Negro. If you got 1%, I'm like, well, we all got the same blood in it. No, how can I tell if you have 1% of white blood in you? How could I tell that from your black blood? Yeah. So you got to get down to the DNA level. And in their age, they had no such way of doing that. So why even think that you can tell a person who have 1% of another culture blood in them that they're this and they're that? But that's how arrogant the world is. Think about it. How arrogant the world is to try to put people in boxes and say you're this, you're that. You can't do that. Tying people down. And Paul says that regardless how you do it, we all came from one blood. And I remember we had, when the injuries during the Gulf War, we had this, I don't know why these people were like that, but I had a guy that I had been spent years with. He came from a place called Codeine, Alabama. And there was nothing good about a black person in his eyes. Like, nothing. And he said his daddy told him they'll have no dealings with us. And if he had to, only deal with us if we're working for them. Never do anything for those people unless they're working for you. You work them like you work them and put them out. And I'm like, wow. So when he got hurt and he had to get blood transfusion, and they went to the crew because he had a rare bird, AB. I had never heard of that you could have AB, two blood types in one. AB negative. I'm like, who is that? But I'm O. Then they said, well, oh, you work just for, I said, no, I'm O. I'm O. I said, well, you got the right blood because your blood can go to anybody. And I said, I don't know if I want him to have my blood. Because he was always saying mean stuff, called me names and stuff, and so, but then I'm trying to think, what would Jesus do? Because he done called me the N-word and all this right here. And I'm going to tell you the truth, there's just something in the base of my heart saying, let him die. Yeah, I should have did that. But we gave him our blood and he lived. And so I'm like, my goodness. But the Texas is one blood. And so no matter what they say about us, no matter how upset they may be with us, they can't change that, can they? The blood's going to be there. And the thing makes us happy is we have the blood of Christ in us through baptism. So, Jesus said, unless I be in you, you're none of mine. So all of us that claims Christ, and Lord I say, we all got Jewish blood in it because Jesus was a Jew. And a lot of people don't like that either. So I'm like, how can you not like something, but then you want what they have, but you don't want them? You can't have what they have without having a part of them because they created it. So I'm like, make you wonder how twisted the minds of people is and how powerful Satan is in the hearts of men to make them think crazy things and to imagine evil things. And so when Paul lays this out for those people on Mars Hill, I'm sure he's really shaking their foundation. But he tells them that in what God has done, he has formed us all together as one creation. And so he says to them that and he has made one blood all nations of men for the dwelling on all the face of the earth. And he has determined the time before appointed and the boundaries of their habitation. There's a lot in that last phrase there, the boundaries of their habitation. Y'all live at that age now where man trying to break the bounds of his habitation and go to Mars, okay? And that they shall seek the Lord, and probably they may find him, though he be not far from any one of us. For in him we live, we move, we have our being, as certain of your poets have said, for we are his what? Offspring. So every creature, every man and woman that's ever born is an offspring of God, is what he's saying, no matter where you come from. And so now you can't segregate yourself because you're all of the human race. And I think I'll be glad if our God let me live to see a time when all men everywhere do away with the race and just say, we're the human race. That ain't happening ours. And so we'll continue on. They'll continue on with their segregation attempts to put us in a box and to deny us certain things. Well, we're gonna stop here at number 9. I know y'all probably already know the answer to that, but we'll stop at number 9, and we'll pick this up next week on precinct. Huh? You didn't get a number 9? Take mine. Yeah, take this one. Yeah. 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 So as we explore to get into Romans, we have to look and see what Paul is finding in the Roman Empire that he lives in, the day he lives in it. And I find that there's some parallels that we'll see in that empire and in the empire we live in. That there was a word that I saw, and then I saw it used in that movie, the Black Panther. they use the word colonizer. Yeah. Anybody ever see the Black Panther? The word colonizer. Yeah. 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 Because they say white people was colonizers. They go to a place and they take over and they colonize it to be what they wanted to be. And so even now, like they were talking about Mr. Trump saying he's going to go to the Middle East and push the Palestinian people out and colonize that area and turn it into a paradise. Yeah. And so I'm like, can't you see? Yeah, the world sees you under this light as someone who come and take. You're not a friend. You're not a neighbor. You're not a supporter. You're someone that just come and take. And so people don't like that. But it seems like he doesn't care. You know. And now we rather keep him than deal with his vice president, because the vice president be worse than him. So, yeah. So we are where we are, and we have to pray for them that God will guide those around them and guide them to keep them in a reasonable place so that we can live peaceful lives. And that's what our prayer has to be. But what you say? Yeah, he'll pack all of us up. Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is crazy. So, y'all, they're going to import y'all over there. So we thank God that He will watch out for us, and it would be merciful to us all, and that some of this is just, sometimes I like to just think that He just, venting, that He doesn't really mean the things that He said, because it's too fantastic to say that He really means it. Some people say do, but I just like to think that He's venting just to get a rise out of us. Some people do that to get a rise out of you, but pray that, yeah. But I know that my God, He has His hand over everything, and God's gonna look out for us. So He's only gonna go so far, but God got us covered, and I'm thankful that God does, and I put all my confidence and trust in Him. Is anybody that still need a prayer that we pray for you with you? Mm. Oh, you did? Oh, okay. Wow. So here. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Yeah. And Sister Joyce, she's a sister of Ivis Kennedy. That's Benita's stepsister. She passed away as well. It's a lot of people leaving, y'all. Uh, they're transitioning. And as I say, they do, the world keep changing, the landscape is changing, people are living differently, doing different things, and it's kind of sad because they're forgetting about those who came before. But we remember them. Yeah, Sister Deborah. Okay, yeah. And I'm asking prayers for our children, because a couple of my niece's children are very sick from this flu thing that's going around. And one of them, she got in trouble with the school board because they said they supposed to have kept them home, but she had to work, so she sent them to school anyway. So now she's got a hearing for sending a sick child to school. I don't know how that's going to work out for her, but what do you do when you don't have anybody? You got to work, and you don't have anybody to be the caregiver. So she's asking for prayers. I said, maybe there's somebody have a solution, but you got to work, keep a roof over your head, because if you don't, And I thought that there would be something out there that, because her daughter's 2 years old, and her mother passed away from the COVID, so she don't have a lot of safety net around her to help. And I didn't realize how deep COVID cut into our community. Our safety nets that we had people to help are gone. So let's just pray for everybody in every situation, because it's just no way to have an answer for what's going on. But I know God has an answer, so we just ask God to help us to understand and do what His will is, so that we can live peacefully and our family can have resources they need. Because like I said, I wouldn't want none of them coming crowding in on me. I thank God I have the peace I have, the little peace I do have. I don't want no 3 or 4 more people come crowding in and say, ain't got nowhere to go, let me in. So God, please keep it where they at, and let me be at peace where I'm at. But if there's nothing else, there's some announcements. She gave me announcements. Oh yeah, announcement. Oh yeah, friend and family bereavement. Friends of Monday is will be funeralizing Brother Blanc, and we'll be there to try to assist them, because they're a small congregation like us, and they need all the help they can. They're asking for supporter food, so you can make a covered dish or something to support them in that. They're highly appreciated. And here we also have Leroy and Brenda asking prayers. Also Miss Pauline. Yeah, she paid. Oh, that's Miss Wilburn, okay. And go to the bottom. Birthday celebration. And report cards, recognition. Is that time again? Huh? yeah, that's coming around quick. It'll be the last Wednesday. We have to report card. Lady Day in Winter Haven this Saturday. Lady Day in Vero Beach next weekend. And Sister Sykes is planning to attend one of them. So y'all get together on that and decide which one y'all want to attend. But there's a lot of, the Lady Day season is back among us. So let them know when you go there. We're still here. We're still hanging on. We haven't given up the fight. And if there is nothing else, Brother Glenn, pray for us and pray us out. No, who prayed last? Norris? Okay, Norris, then you pray us out.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Lord, we thank you for keeping us through this day. We thank you for all your kindness, your mercy, and your grace. Lord, for watching over us, guiding our steps. Lord, we like to thank you for this portion of our lesson tonight. Be with us and guide us, Lord, as we go further through this lesson. Give us understanding and compassion, Lord. Help it to be a light to us.
Yes,
Give us understanding and guidance and lead us in the way that we should go. Lord, we like to thank you for all of those present at this time tonight.
Yes, Father.
All of those who that are on Duo,
yes,
or whoever's listening in. Lord, bless our children. Help
yes,
us, Lord, to be good leaders, Lord, to help them so they can grow to be good leaders.
Yes, Father.
Lord, we like to thank you for all the sick, the poor, the needy.
Yes, Father.
Bless all of those who have lost loved ones, all of those who are sick, all of those who are in need.
Yes, Father.
Lord, we thank you so much for everything that you have done and you're going to do for us, Lord. Just let us keep an open mind, Lord, that you are in control all the time.